Welcome to the Global Resilience Exchange or Reading Club. I'm super excited for today's session. I hope you all know who Michele Turner is, and if not, you have the best opportunity to get to know her today. This is our last reading club of the year, but I'm super excited to say that we do have a few authors that have reached out recently. So we should have a couple more sessions in the new year at least. Also, this is a reading club, not a book club, meaning that any books that you all are reading and want to facilitate a discussion, you're welcome to share that information with me and we can still meet and talk about that. So these don't particularly have to be author-led, but I'm really happy that they have been so far because I think it does add a lot of value to the discussion. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Cameras are not required, but you are welcome to come on. You are welcome to stay off. Throughout Michele's presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, but first, let me formally introduce her. So Michele is a Amazon #1 bestselling author, keynote speaker, and resiliency leader with over 30 years of experience in the areas of governance, risk, and compliance. She is the chairperson of the board of directors for the Disaster Recovery Institute International, which their conference is coming up in February in Jacksonville. So if you will be present, make sure you say hello and connect with other folks that are on this call. She's also the head of global business resilience for Marriott International. This global role includes above property business continuity with operational resilience planning, emergency response with property crisis management planning for Marriott managed properties, risk mitigation, and product management. Prior roles include head of global business resilience for Amazon Corporate, as well as governance, risk, compliance, and business continuity roles within Microsoft. She has her Master's of Science degree in both business continuity and cybersecurity, with an emphasis on cyber law and international perspectives in cyberspace. Both degrees are from Norwich University. So I want to welcome Michele and encourage you all to reach out to her via LinkedIn. So not only will I be putting her LinkedIn URL in the chat shortly, I'll also be putting the links to both of her books. Lessons Learned, Short Stories of Continuity and Resilience, as well as Color Me Resilient, the ABCs of Bouncing Forward. So hopefully you already read Lessons Learned, Short Stories of Continuity and Resilience, which is what we will discuss today, but you also have the opportunity to get the Color Me Resilient, which she'll talk a little bit about during her presentation. So I'm going to open up the conversation with some questions that I've already come up with about the process, which kind of keeps us on theme of how we've been running these sessions. So welcome, Michele.
Well, thank you for the invite.
So first question, what led you to write this book?
So here's the deal. This book was decades in the making, in my mind at least. Um, I There were so many situations, both professionally and personally, that I was going through where I thought I've got to be the only person that's dealing with this. And then I thought, well, I'm probably not the only person that's dealing with this, but you know what? This was a Lulu. And so I'd love to be able to document some things for others that I considered as I was going through this situation, because I want people to know that, hey, you know what? If you're going through something that feels strange, it's very different in the way that you approach it, the way that you're going through it, because you're an individual, but I may have some things that might help. And so I really just wanted to be able to document some things to let people know that, in essence, you're not alone.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Next question, what are you most proud about regarding this book?
The impact on some, both from a professional and a personal perspective. So I have templates in there and I spell things out relative to the approach on continuity planning and resilience planning as well. So I thought that there could be some things that would be helpful for people, and I was happy to see, based on the notes that I get, that people really appreciated that information. But what really, really sort of stopped me in my tracks, I've had people come to me that were going through things like dementia in their family. And I mention in the book, I talk about the frontotemporal lobe dementia that my father had. And I've had people come to me and say, you talked about it, you were vulnerable, and I'm going through something similar, and I don't quite know up from down. And so just sharing the story and sharing how I approached it and sharing the shelters in places of the mind blog that I wrote, it really helped them. And truth be told, I went through an interview once right after I was leaving Amazon, and I went into an interview, and the person that was interviewing me read the book, and their father was going through the same thing. And it was the very first time that I was in an interview where she had to table the interview for a second because she wanted to talk about it because she was going through some things. And right then we immediately connected. So it's the impact that both the personal and professional stories have had on the industry and on individuals.
Thank you for sharing. And my last question for now, what were some of the obstacles or challenges during writing this process and creating this book and bringing it to your audience?
So during the process, the biggest obstacle was me getting out of my own way. Meaning, when I started writing it, it just started to flow because, again, it had been in my head for decades. But then I started to say, well, wait a minute. Should I really put that in there? Or did I say this right? This is my very first book. Is that the way it's supposed to be done? And then I hired an editor, and then I didn't like what the editor put in. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to speak from the heart and write from the heart. But the biggest obstacle was really myself and a little bit of questioning what should be included and if it made sense to do. But I did
Perfect.
it.
And we're so happy that you did and that you're open to be able to speak with us and connect with us and continue to share the lessons learned because it didn't stop after this book, right? You're still in the field, you're
No,
still learning, you're still growing.
still learning, still growing. Yeah.
Perfect. So at this time, if you want to share your screen, Michelle, I'm going to pipe down for a little bit and let you run the show. Folks, I just put her URL for LinkedIn into the chat as well as the links for both of her books. So I encourage you all, especially if you read it, to please leave her a review. It's very, very helpful for authors. And so we do, this is a complimentary session. So a few words would really go a long way so that we can encourage, continue to encourage authors to come. And she did not, pay me to say this. So I'm just asking, for some encouragement for her and all the authors that we have. So I will continue to repost that if the chat gets busy, but I'm going to stop talking now. And Michelle, thank you once again, and let's give her our full attention.
All right. And thank you for that. Definitely reviews are important. So here's the deal. I'll do just a mini introduction. You've already done a great job on introducing me. Thank you for that, Daniela. But I'm going to do a mini introduction. We have a brain teaser. I do a brain teaser anytime I discuss. And it really ties into the topic and the nuggets that I'll be sharing. I always set the stage because I want to make sure, hey, what's resilience? What's continuity? I want to make sure that we get that as a baseline. We'll talk about parse, and parse is in the book. Every chapter represents either prepare, assess, remediate, sustain, or examine. The bonus E is, I believe, chapter 6, and then upward and onward. We'll talk about some things there. And then key takeaways. I have some written down just in case you don't, but I'm hoping that you do have some key takeaways as we go through this. And then I have the appendix, which just has all of the links actually that are included in the book directly. But I've included them here in the deck as well, just to make sure that you have quick access to them. So In terms of the introduction, yep, 30 plus years in governance and risk and control and compliance and business continuity. You talked about the master's degrees that I have in business continuity and cybersecurity. I'm also a senior fellow for the Norwich Center for Global Resilience and Security, and I've developed a course and I've taught that course at Norwich on disaster management. So I'm adjunct faculty there. As you mentioned, I'm the DRI International Board of Directors Chair, as well as an instructor there, teaching business continuity, cybersecurity, risk management, personal and professional preparedness, as well as health, and the master's level preparedness from a health perspective and master's level as well. And you mentioned that I'm an Amazon #1 best-selling author for this book. All of that's great stuff. I love to travel and spend time with family. And so there are pictures there of the family and of the different trips that I've gone on. You'll see it's the third picture. That's the Great Wall of China. And I worked for Amazon at the time. So there's the Pecky mascot that's there. All of that, yay. But you know what? I'm a grandma. And my grandsons, Damari and Isaiah, Damari is actually 9 and Isaiah is 6. And I say all the time, I'm pretty sure that they're geniuses. And we'll see if we can get them to maybe be the youngest certified professionals. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I'm a super proud grandma, but family is very, very important to me. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that with you. Now, the very next slide we're going to go to is our brain teaser slide. And on that slide, I'm going to need for you to find all of the F's in the sentence that I'm going to show. I'm going to count to 20 while you do this because that's annoying. You're trying to focus and I'm counting, and that's just how disasters are. They're very disrespectful. And so I'm going to be counting up to 20, but I want you to find all of the F's in the sentence, and then we'll have a conversation afterwards. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So how many people found 3 F's? And you can use your hand raise or whatever. So how many people found 4 F's? How many people found 5 F's? And how many people found 6 F's? 6 F's. And I can't see everybody. How many, Daniela, how many people found 6 F's?
I think it's just one.
Okay. There are indeed 6 F's. Finished files are the result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of years. Here's the kicker. Our brain, when we see the word of, it changes the F to a V. And so a lot of people miss those F's in of. And it's just quite interesting. I bring this up though, because when you think about resilience and continuity and crisis management, this is not a one person show. It takes an understanding and engagement of the full team. And so for those that just found 3 F's, maybe there was an opportunity to, sort of elbow your partner if you're next to somebody and say, hey, do you see another F in there? Is this all we have? But the same thing goes with the resilience in other areas. If you look at a laptop, if you're coming from security, you may say, hey, what are the security controls that we have in place on this particular laptop, BitLocker or something else? If you're coming from a DR perspective, disaster recovery, you may say, is that backed up? So I say all of that to say we come with our own perspectives, with our own expertise, but we need to really expand the discussion and the engagement with others who can potentially help us find the F's, who could potentially help us understand the bigger picture. We don't always have to do this on our own. there's help there if we just reach out and ask for it. So I like to do that brain teaser because, again, it really folds in quite nicely, I feel, with the team effort that is resilience, continuity, and crisis management as well. But let's talk about what's continuity, what's resilience. So according to Merriam-Webster, from a continuity perspective, it's that uninterrupted connection, succession, or union. Resilience, the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And a lot of people, when they think of resilience, they immediately think of, oh, this is about bouncing back. Take that totally out of your vernacular, if you would please. Resilience is truly, I believe, about bouncing forward. I want to be able to learn from what I've just gone through. I don't want to go back to what was at the end of the day. I want to be able to move forward based on those learnings. And so I implore you, if you hear someone talking about resilience and they talk about it in terms of bouncing back, correct them. It's truly about being able to learn those lessons and bounce forward. I've put a couple of links here in terms of industry related terms, the DRI or National Glossary for Resilience, and then you have BCI and DRJ, Disaster Recovery Journal as well in terms of definitions. But the core of this, and Daniela, you referred to an extra, and what I'm pulling up now is that extra. You mentioned it on a LinkedIn post, and that extra is while parse is the core that we're going to be tracking to. What I did was I thought, parse was a way for me to really get clear on something that was familiar for organizations to be able to walk through the continuity and resilience and all of that space. I wanted to have something that was really acronyms are great, but I wanted to have something that they could really hold on to and remember as we're going through the process. But then I started thinking, you know what? It's not just about business continuity or disaster recovery or risk management even. I wanted to be able to show that there are connection points. Maybe by showing those connection points across cyber risk and cybersecurity, and I've just recently added community preparedness and resilience, maybe by showing the connection points as we're having conversations with these contacts that are in those spaces, it won't always feel like we're having these siloed conversations or these well, in my space we do this. If we could see the similarities and have conversations about those, maybe we could leverage some controls and we can draw a closer alignment in certain areas. And so the parse crosswalk is included in the Color Me Resilient, the ABCs of Bouncing Forward, that coloring book. But I've also included it here in this presentation because I think that it's important for us. And this isn't the end all be all. You might see something like this and modify it accordingly, maybe based on your organization or other. But I found this to be very helpful as I'm having conversations just to make sure that people are tracking and we don't have those siloed fights, so to speak, when we're in these conversations. But this is a great lead in to the first, the P in parse, where we talk about prepare. And I have a lot of information here in terms of, well, when you're building a resilience program or you're building a continuity program, first of all, understand not only what's the strategy that you have from a resilience or continuity program perspective, but what's the strategy at the top of the house for your organization? Because you want to be able to tie in your mission and your vision for your program directly to the overarching value and strategy for the organization. Because when you can do that, you truly do show the value of continuity, the value of resilience, and how it's going to help support what's required for the survivability of that overall entity. Also, as you're going through and preparing, understand what's prior data that should be considered as you're developing this. So what's Your audit data. Have you taken a look at that? Were there audit items that were called out that really feed into the value of why we need to have a program? And also, who are your sponsors and your supporters? For me personally, my biggest sponsor was my Aunt Bernice. Aunt Bernice was in academia, and she was the person that I would always go to and say, but why? She would always answer my but why questions. And on one occasion, I said, Aunt Bernice, why can't I go to school yet? And I might have been 3, 4 years old. And she said, well, Mickey, you know how to write your letters, you know how to read. And so, you know what? There's no reason that you shouldn't go to school. And she was my biggest advocate, my biggest sponsor for being able to go in front of the board. And I was able to start kindergarten at a very early age. So I put this here because as you're building the program and even individually for your own career, do you have a really good understanding for who your sponsors are and who your supporters are? Supporters will say, hey, you know what? Manny is a good egg. He's a good person. That's what a supporter will say. A sponsor will say, let me tell you about that Manny. Manny, I've been involved in some programs that he has developed. Specifically, when he did the risk assessment for our organization, he allowed us to really have a better understanding of what's most critical and when we're looking at our business criticality, but he leveraged the risks that we could fall into and understanding that impact. That was a great lead in to what we identified as part of understanding our critical functions. They'll go on and talk about you in rooms that you're not even in. So I bring that up because I want you to not only in your program development, but personally understand who your sponsors and supporters are. I have something here also in terms of Harvard Business School. They have what's called the 4 canonical questions that came out of COVID, where they were saying, well, ask the question about what is the situation? Do we really understand what the situation is? And so when you're developing the program, do that background, do your homework, understand what came before, understand what you're really trying to get to. To whom is this happening to? Who's going to be impacted or affected? And so when you develop a program, you develop it with an understanding of the whole business in mind, but then you whittle it down to the critical few. So who's going to really be affected and impacted in this, and who are you writing the program in and of itself for? And why do we care? Again, what's the impact to the organization? Why do we care? And then what action should we take based on that? I've listed the RACI because, again, I think that ties in a little bit with understanding all of the different groups that could be engaged, but also understanding who's responsible, who's going to be accountable, who's going to be consulted on this, and who's going to be informed. And understanding that at the beginning of it allows you to not feel bad, because sometimes with the RACI, people ask for a RACI after when something happens when they're far down the line. And it's almost as if a RACI is a punishment. And it really isn't. If you have clarity right off the top on who's who in the crew, as I call it, and what they need to accomplish, it helps you really develop the program as it needs to be developed. And in terms of the 3 C's, clarity, providing clarity again on exactly what's required. How am I communicating with those who are responsible, consulted, informed, who are accountable? How do I drive that communication? And then do we really understand at a high level where the costs may come from? We might not know all of the costs at the time, but we can tell them that there's going to probably be a cost for software. There may be a cost in terms of maybe consultative support. So how are we calling these things out at a high level up front, letting them know that as we continue and build on the program, we're going to refine this and we're going to come back to leadership and those who are held accountable to make sure that we're getting their feedback and their approval on these items. The last area that I have under P, and apologies if this is really just an eye chart, but this is where I'd like some feedback, not only on what we've talked about, but when I think about planning and preparation, an hour of planning can save you 10 hours of doing. And that comes from Dale Carnegie. We don't want to get in the habit of rework. And a lot of people will say, can we just get started on this already? There's some planning that has to be put in place so we really know what are we looking to do. When you remove that planning piece, you don't save time. You actually add time onto it because you've not taken the time to really think through things. So, looking at what we've discussed so far, does the racy in the beginning, does that resonate with you? Have you gotten into situations where people from a planning perspective, they don't do the racy in the beginning, they do it at the end and they run into problems? Anybody have racy stories that you want to share?
I think you're very generous saying that they did it at all.
You got something,
um,
Manny? Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead, Daniela.
Oh no, Manny.
Okay.
Well, thank you. And Michelle, it's an honor to be on the stage with you again. I remember our times at Norwich and your great insights then
Well, thank
and
you.
now. Um, Planning is key, especially when it comes to emergency management as well as business continuity, disaster recovery. If you use in the United States, we have the incident command system and the planning. There's a concept of a planning P. It's the shape of a letter P, but there's different portions where you best to complete those as part of having a successful response to an event. And a number of folks may not be aware of all the components that come into a business continuity, disaster recovery, emergency management, crisis management, but planning is essential.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Anyone else have any comments before I move on to assess? Yes, go ahead.
Touching on Manny's comment, I forget which general it was that said plans are nothing, planning is everything.
That's deep.
Because
Yes.
Was it
because
Eisenhower?
it
I
might have
think.
been, but it was, he was basically saying that the process of creating your plan gets you so much insight into what's going on, what's needed, what can go wrong, how you can respond to it. By the time you get to the actual document, it's almost unnecessary.
I love that. Yes, it's about the planning. And so often we get feedback that, hey, we want to move forward. We've got to do this. There's some things we have to understand first. We can't jump in the deep end without being prepared.
And then, of course, there's the classic military axiom that no battle plan survives contact with the enemy.
There
So
we go.
we have our plans, but what you need is not just the plan, but the people to understand the process so that when things go sideways and your plan doesn't quite work, you don't fall apart. You adjust, you
Exactly.
adapt, improvise, overcome.
Exactly. Exactly. Daniela, did you have another comment? Or no, who oh, actually that's Dipu?
Paul?
Dipu?
Thank you, Michelle. I'm just reminded as you bring on the RACI model, it's just remind me that when everyone is responsible, no one is accountable. So it's almost when you go into a project and everybody's pointing at everybody to do something and nobody really knows what's meant to be done or takes full accountability. And also with the lack of sponsor, you can run like a headless chicken, but you don't really have somebody that's there to support you. And hence the planning questions are so critical that you had there as the foundation towards your as your path. Yeah, thank you for that.
Of course, you need to have that oversight. You've got to understand who's who in the crew. I'm going to go on to assess. And with assess, this is really about understanding your threats. First of all, understanding the difference between threats and risks. That's a big thing for me. From a threat perspective, if you think about it as the threat is the tornado. Now, based on that tornado, my community, my organization could be extremely vulnerable. There could be some exposure there. There's susceptibility. But based on my understanding of that threat, of those vulnerabilities, I'm able to understand, well, you know what controls do I need to put in place so that they don't become significant risks? Because if that tornado hits the facility and I don't have certain controls in place, whether it be weatherproofing or other things, the ultimate risk in terms of the impact that could happen to my systems, ultimately to my data, all of that is at risk. But really understanding that story and walking it through is pretty critical. And when we think ultimately about threats, we would go into some hazard mitigation and think about those things, or hazard analysis, excuse me. When we're thinking about risk, we want to think about it in terms of the inherent risk and the residual risks. So inherently, what's the impact and the likelihood or probability, even without any controls? It just is. And the impact could be reputational or operational, financial. What's the, again, likelihood that it can happen? But those two things make up your inherent risk. And then when you look at residual risk, now I get to add controls. I get to add maybe alarms or multi-factor authentication. And yes, policies are controls, they're paper, but they set the stage so that you understand the why of things. And procedures could be identified as controls as well, even though they're more like the what. But I document this because as we take a look at assess, it's really critical to understand the lay of the land, but really be honest about the risk. And so many times we have when we have a risk conversation, no one wants to say too much of anything. They're number one, maybe they're not understanding of where this information is going to go and am I going to get blamed? But the personal story that I have from a risk perspective, and Manny, you have a comment or a question?
I had a comment on the assessment portion under disaster recovery. That is so much, it's missed so much because
You're right.
people don't have a single version of the truth, as they say. Through the whole life cycle, procure, install, move, add, change, dispose.
That's right.
There's opportunities that people miss to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Even
Exactly.
the names of systems and applications. Someone might call it a dog, someone might call it a cat, but it's the same thing. You have to normalize that through unique application numbers, things like that.
And I like how you called out everyone needs to be on the same page and be very, again, truthful about what the risk is. And I'll tell the personal story, and here are just some slides of the way that once you do the rating structure, the way that you can apply it, be it a high risk, a medium risk, or other. I'll tell you the personal story, but actually, as you brought that up, I'm going to talk about the Stockdale paradox. Stockdale paradox. Anyone familiar with Admiral James Stockdale?
Remember, he was a presidential candidate or vice presidential candidate.
And a prisoner of war, actually.
And a POW, yes.
And when he was released, they said, you know what? Give us some encouraging words. Give us some insight. And so he said, you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your reality, whatever they might be. And they said, you know what, Admiral, that is not inspiring. But I think it is. I think it's inspiring because basically what he's saying is be truthful, be honest. Look, if he was, as a prisoner of war, if he was there and he was thinking about rainbows and bunnies, how would he have been able to get through the situation? No, you've got to think about exactly the situation that you're in. You're able to potentially come up with some mitigation strategies by being honest about what's the risk, what's the impact, who do I need to engage? Again, him thinking about rainbows and bunnies or us thinking about rainbows and bunnies when we're doing risk assessment, that is not helping us. We've got to be honest and we've got to be straightforward. The personal story that I have is about my own risk management. Now, I've gone through and built programs for a variety of companies, Microsoft, Marriott, Amazon. But at this particular time, I was just busy. I was busy doing stuff. And I didn't feel like I had time to really take a step back. I had my daughter's recital. I had to go on this trip to see my in-laws. And we were driving from Seattle to Texas. And I was supposed to help drive, but I actually slept all the way there. And I slept all the way back when we came back. And I just wasn't feeling well. My chest was bothering me, but I'm like, you know what? I got too much stuff to do. I've got a C-level meeting in the morning. Ariana has a recital. Gotta go, gotta go. And as the or the days went on, it got to the point where I had to do what I call chain breathing, which is because I couldn't quite catch my breath. But I'm like, look, I have too much to do. Can't stop, can't stop. It gets to the point where I am going to, I know, I'm with you. I was not thinking clearly at all, Rob. So I get to the point where I finally, I'm going to the recital. I get there, and by the time I try to get out, I can't stand upright because the pain is so much in my chest. I have to be hunched over. So I go into the facility, the recital, and I see my husband and the other kids are already there, and I say, Oscar, my husband, I say, Oscar, I can't really breathe that well. And he's like, oh my gosh, what do we do? I'm like, up, 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 up. Wait a minute, because he is not good with disasters. I'm like, wait a minute, we're going to be civilized. We are going to wait until Ariana gets off the stage, and then we'll leave, and then we'll go home. And so that's what we did. We wait. We started walking toward the car, and he said, well, okay, get in my car. And I'm like, no, no, no. I drove myself here. I'm driving myself back. Just really being stubborn at this point. But I end up getting in the car. We get to the house, and I can't really see straight at this point. I don't know what's going on, but I tell him, Oscar, I need to go to the hospital. Something's not right. And I can barely talk now. And he's like, okay, do I have time to go make a sandwich? I'm like, no, Oscar, no time for a sandwich. I'm pretty sure the good Lord is calling me home. So let's get a move on. We get in the car, we get to the hospital. And by this time, he almost has to carry me in because I can't walk and I can't see and I can't really talk yet. The doctor, one of the doctors and the nurses, they're running, and I hear the doctor say, oh my gosh, she's fading. We need to give her morphine. And I say, no, 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 no morphine. I don't want to see pink elephants. Don't ask me why I thought I would see pink elephants, but I did. I thought that. And so I'm attempting to argue, not able to speak, not able to stand up. And he finally says, Miss Turner, I don't know why you're still here. Alive, that is. But do you mind if I continue to save your life? And I thought, as soon as I can see one of you as opposed to three, I am writing a letter to someone about something. Here's the reality. I had a pulmonary embolism. My lungs were filled with blood clots. Normally, it takes you there. But these blood clots, seeing as though the lungs were filled, the only place they had left to go was my brain. And they didn't want to have that. So bottom line, I spent 7 days in the hospital. I had to be on blood thinners. They were looking at blood transfusions. It was a to-do. Now, here's the question. Was I thinking about the risk as I was going? Was I thinking about the impact that I would not only have on myself, but on my family if I didn't take care of myself? Was I thinking about the likelihood that this could occur? And was I thinking about the controls that I should have been putting in place to be able to address this, like slowing down in order to speed up? We can do it all, but not all at the same time. And so as you're going through and you're doing the assessment, make sure that you're pacing yourself. Make sure that you're engaging others. Make sure that you're prioritizing what needs to be done today, tomorrow, or maybe at some point. And really think about applying those brakes. When you're in a car, you don't lay on the brake the whole time. You'd never go anywhere. But you do apply the brake gingerly when there's an opportunity to do so and be safe. So I encourage you there. And again, in the next one, where there could potentially be some discussion, I talk about yes, maybe, and no all the time. We have an opportunity to determine how we need to move forward, how we prioritize. The oldest, shortest word words, yes and no, are those which require the most thought. So how are you prioritizing? How are you, whether it's personal or professional, how are you making sure that you're really getting to the core of things? And it's okay if you have to say no to some things, or maybe if you have to think about it. But I'm going to ask right now, is this resonating with people? Have you run into that, not just personally, but professionally, where you're saying, oh, wow, I'm going to have to go through this risk. How do I communicate it? How do I share this? How do I truly share the impact? Any comments on this one? Any questions from the book either? This was a big one. I learned about boundaries here. I learned that when I got so excited that I would just go, and I was showing people how I wanted them to engage with me. So I couldn't blame them when they filled my plate. I was filling my own plate. I was showing them how I wanted to be engaged, and I had to really stop. And I have this red chair that I would sit down. It wasn't a punishment. It was my opportunity to take a break. Daniela, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll be really quick because I know we're running on 15 minutes left. So I think about this in terms of we have the role of working with other business units who don't necessarily understand resilience or what we're doing. And a lot of times I'm like, so what keeps you up at night? And they're like, nothing. And I'm like, really? And they're like, no, because it's just another day in paradise for them, right? So they don't really even, because they're so used to seeing the things the way that they are, they're used to being superwoman and supermen. They don't really know how to articulate that maybe they do need to create some boundaries, or they need to say maybe or no on things that are being thrown at them. So that's something to think about when we're working with our business partners, to kind of help them to understand what those risks could be or what those boundaries should be.
That's right. Spot on.
Rob?
Yeah, I had to earlier this year, I had to take a hard look at my processes myself and say, this isn't working. I have to set this aside. This isn't working. I'm doing something wrong. But if I keep fighting with this, I'll get 4 pieces of work done by the end of the year, and none of them will be done well.
Yep.
And boy, that was a hard decision because I had the process set out, and I got to take that out and just put it aside for now. Whew, that was hard.
Yeah. But you've got to be honest with yourself, as well.
Back to the general. Yep.
That's right. So when we talk about remediate, which is the R in parse, we're talking about what's the strategy. From a business continuity perspective, you may be thinking about, hey, if something happens, if there's an immediate fire in one of the closets, well, what's my local strategy? Am I able just to go to another facility that's close enough yet far enough away as not to be impacted? Remote. Hey, if I have a situation that occurs in Seattle, have I already communicated with people in Bratislava that I may have to transition things there? And what are the considerations from a language or other perspective that I need to think about? And when I'm thinking about strategy, third-party risk management, have I had a conversation with the vendors to let them know that, hey, you're supporting a critical function for us. So I need to understand, I don't want your disaster to become my disaster. And so what do you have going on? Are you going to be able to really support us in this? And there are a variety of considerations that we have in terms of the dependencies and training, and do we have all of the necessary things? I also included a snapshot here, just a template of the ways that you can start documenting critical functions. And a lot of this is already in the software that you might use. But it's really, what's the strategy? And in this, I had a situation where I had to think about my own strategy. I thought I had everything ticked and tied with my career. I was at an organization that I absolutely loved. Found out, actually, my father, he called me one morning and said, hey, Mickey, I hear your company is going to be going through a layoff. Are you okay? And I'm like, well, Daddy, I'm on my way to work. So I think I'm okay. I'm going to get there. Now, whether they have the door open for me, I don't know, but I think I'm good. But I really thought I was fine. I was in the top X%, all of this. I get there and I see someone who's crying as I'm walking in, and he said, Michele, did you get an email? Well, the reality is I did get an email, and the email said, this is going to be a tough day, show empathy to your colleagues. Then I got another email that said, meet in a conference room at 11 o'clock. And I thought, hey, they want me to meet in the conference room at 11 o'clock because they're going to be letting people go at their offices, and they don't want us to be there. They want us to sequester in this area. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to sequester, and I'm going to show empathy. Well, he says, no, if you got a letter, and the letter said, don't tell anybody. So I didn't tell him. He's like, if you got the email, you're going to be laid off. And I'm like, well, I don't know what email you got, but I didn't get that email. So he's like, look, at 11 o'clock, let's walk down to the conference room and we'll talk. I walked down with him. As I walk in, someone said, oh no, Michele, not you. And I'm like, oh my goodness, they're in the wrong room. She should be in her office where they're going to be letting her go, but she's here, and I'm going to show empathy for her because it's going to be hard. So I walked to the front. He's like, Michele, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to the front. I want to hear everything they have to say. I've got to be able to write things down and show empathy. He's like, Michele, when you get what's really going on, because I'm concerned about you right now, I want you to nod your head and tell me you get it. So we sit down, and the very first thing that happens is the corporate vice president comes up and says, I'm so sorry, this is a tough day. Everyone in this room has been impacted by a reduction in force. I thought I heard something, but I didn't know for sure. And so I'm sort of rocking, because I do that when I'm thinking. Then HR came up and they said, now all of your material are back in the back in boxes. And I hadn't even seen those people. Where did they come from? But you have your severance packages back there that you can get. So now I'm doing like this with my nails. I'm rocking and I'm doing this. And then they said, and by the way, today will be your last day, and there are garbage bags that will be available in another facility for you to put your laptops and other things in. And when I get really, really upset, I can't cry out of both eyes. I can only cry out of one eye. So here I sit rocking and doing this and crying out of one eye. I'm surprised security didn't escort me out. But I looked over at my friend and I just shook my head, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. I understand. At that time, I thought, oh my goodness, what's my strategy? What do you mean I was involved in a reduction in force? Here's the thing. The same insight that I had 5 minutes before that happened is the same insight and expertise that I had. And so my strategy was that I was going to leverage the insight that I have from an expertise perspective that I've done with other companies. I didn't need to feel like I didn't have anywhere to go, even though that's the way I immediately felt. And there are stories in the book that tell you exactly how my oldest daughter helped me through that, even at a young age. But I talk about this from a tactical versus strategic perspective. Number one, you always have a choice. Develop your strategy and know that if you need to be flexible in your strategy, be flexible. And I did, and it worked for the better. From a tactical, there are going to be some tactical pieces that are necessary to develop a full strategy, and understand that and be comfortable with that. Tactical versus strategic. Maybe one coin, but there are two sides. I'm going to ask that we talk about some detail at the very, very end as we go through this. Sustain is the S, and it talks about the ability to do testing and exercising, and really all of the plans that you've developed so far, all of the strategies, do they blessed work? And so I have a copy here of the exercise objectives, but how are we building that out? How are we testing that functionality? How do we know all of the things that we've documented that they actually will come to pass? From a personal perspective, my dad taught me a lot with this, with his frontotemporal lobe dementia. When you're in that state, when we were in COVID, the message was we're all in this together. But for him, it wasn't. He needed structure. That's part of dementia. You need that structure, that day in and day out. And so we had to think about how do we address things from his perspective. Birthdays, we couldn't celebrate it directly with him. So how did we celebrate those things? How did we collaborate? How did he have continuity? He was a Mennonite minister, and he didn't care if the governor or the president told him, you can't go to church, you've got a shelter in place. He was going to church. And so how did I help? By making sure that he could still get what he needed, continue those areas, I got him a laptop, and Daddy was zooming here, hither and yon, which caused other issues. But he was able to zoom and to get what he needed to get. But how do we drive that continuity as we're moving through the process and we're doing the exercises? If we find an issue, let's do a happy dance because we found it. We've identified those gaps in a safe space. We didn't identify them during an actual disaster. Who have we brought forth to collaborate and find the F's to understand what may be missing? And how do we celebrate those wins? Look, if you want to go fast, then go alone. But if you want to go far, you've got to bring others along. It's that diversity of thought that provides that support. And when I think about this, I also think about unified command, how we have core groups, core areas that do certain things that help us to sustain our operations. But we've got to go through the process of exercising and testing those things to make sure that they work as appropriate. And when we're examining bottom line, do we have benchmarks and metrics and KPIs? And how do we show that trending? How do we know that everything that we've learned, we can embed them in the process? We're not learning just for learning's sake. How are we making things better? And how have you embedded things in your personal learning? How do you make sure that there are continuous process improvements? A lot of this has to do with being real and being honest, just like we talked about in the assessment phase. I developed the technology when I was at Microsoft. I worked closely with the CIO in developing one of his technology committees. And in one of our committee meetings, he's like, Michele, I don't want to see any fruit in this meeting. And I thought, what are you talking about? I've got brownies for snack. And I'm glad I didn't say that, because what he was talking about, he didn't want to see something that was like a watermelon is green on the outside, but red on the inside. Don't show me that type of fruit where you're always showing me green, 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 when it's really red the next day or later on that afternoon. Show me the red up front so I can help you, or show me the yellow so I can help you guide it toward green and not red. So how are we identifying those key steps within the continuity and resilience programs? How are we really making sure that we identify those things and embed them in the learning and drive continuous improvement? And the bonus E just has to do with education, which is critical. For me, I had to leave school early, college early, because we ran out of funds. We ran out of money. But I knew that my dream was potentially going to be deferred, but it wasn't going to be denied. And so it took some years, 5, 6 years, but I did walk across that stage to get my bachelor's degree. And as I reached out my hand to grab that diploma, I knew the woman looked familiar. But as I got closer, it was Oprah Winfrey. And it turns out that her assistant was going to the same school at the same time and had asked her to come. And the learnings that I got from that speech that she provided in terms of making sure that we focused on our calling, we focused on our passion. I took time for myself, and it was a long time to get that education, but it allowed me to have that continuous process improvement for myself, to continue learning. And yes, what if I failed? But what if I succeeded? Failure is not a bad word. Failure allows you to say, hey, this didn't work. Let me move on with something else. And the last chapter of the book talks about onward and upward and onward, and I align it to the resilience life cycle. There are 2 aspects, preparation and execution. And how have you prepared? How have you gathered things? When an event occurs, is it an incident or is it a crisis? And how do I execute on those things that have already come through? There's a lot of key takeaways that I've listed, but I want to hear, in the few minutes that we have left, I want to hear from you. Were there any nuggets that you gathered out of reading the book or out of the presentation? What resonated most with you as we've gone through this? I'd love to hear your feedback and any questions at the same time.
Well, for me, Michele, it's the whole PARS concept that was enlightening. I've seen you present it before, and each time I see it, I get something different in terms of my understanding. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Manny. Rob?
At the risk of being the guy who talks too much, in the process of your presentation today, I had a realization. I've been heavily focused on the all hazards approach to continuity management, but that's only good for response. It's not good for prevention. I
There
need
we
to
go.
go back and review all my processes now in 2026 and look at prevention rather than response.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. That's a huge area, because we know we can plan for the what if, but hey, what have we put up here in terms of proactive measures? We want to be able to drive that effort where we don't always have to react. And there's a whole thing between response and react. Response, there are procedures, but react is a little bit emotional, and you can go a couple of different ways. So I love that you've called that out. Any other comments? Yes, Dipwell.
Afnan, just to say thank you for equipping us with practical tools and a renewed sense of confidence as we lead resilience in our own respective spaces. I'm based in South Africa, and I think I just love the platform that Daniela created for us to really engage with various people. I appreciate the PASS model. I think it's a brilliant framework for connecting all the risk-related elements, including communications. I mean, you've brought in a beautiful element on the risk assessment side so that we can have a true risk conversation around our threats and vulnerabilities, even when we undertake a personal project like writing a book, right? And I just think that there's just too much wisdom in terms of your prioritization model. The first thing that comes to mind is organizations often load a lot of things on the BCM manager or resilience officer's table because everything seems to have a resilience link to it. So part of that prioritization wisdom is that we really have to see what is scope creep, what are we able to undertake so that we can fill our plate with the right stuff. Otherwise we'll be all over the show. Just being able to really look at what's put on your table and thinking, is this a yes, maybe, or a no, and maybe it's a clear no. So just guarding against scope creep and all of that. So thank you so much for your personal insight. Really appreciate it. I didn't read the book, but I will surely get a copy and indulge. Appreciate it.
Excellent, excellent. And we have one more comment.
Yeah, Michelle, I think it was a super presentation. I mean, what I'm taking is the point of taking time for yourself, because you realize that, I mean, in most of your stories, it got to a time that was where the big challenge was. You were not taking time for yourself. So I think it's helped me to understand when to say no, when to, take your time. And thank you. It was a wonderful presentation.
Of course, of course. So I know we're at time. One of the quotes I have from the book, it's in the challenge and in the change that we learn our greatest lessons. And so I encourage us, let's bounce forward, get those learnings and use those to propel you to the next steps. As I mentioned, there's appendix information is here in here, but thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the platform, Daniela. Have a wonderful holiday season.